how many filmmakers can say they actually created a genre? It's hard enough to simply make a movie, but it's a rare sort of accomplishment when one's work is so groundbreaking, so influential, it actually changes the cinematic landscape forever, leading to other filmmakers trying to capitalize on the format you have developed. Whether you consider those imitators to be rip-offs or, to be more polite, homages, it must be seen as something of an honor to be considered the forefather of an entire genre, an honor not many can claim. In 1928, director Fritz Lang's silent film Spies created much of the template that would later inform numerous films like James Bond, Jason Bourne, and Mission Impossible. Frank Capra's 1934 classic It Happened One Night gave birth to the screwball comedy. With Godzilla in 1954, Ishiro Honda started a wave of Japanese kaiju or giant monster movies that continues to this day. In 1968, George Romero reinvented the voodoo-based cinematic zombies of the past into undead flesh-eaters in Night of the Living Dead, creating one of horror's most ubiquitous subgenres in the process. 10 years later, in 1978, John Carpenter honed the elements already somewhat developed in films like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Black Christmas, and delivered his Halloween, leading to a glut of slashers that would dominate the horror landscape throughout the early 80s. The blaxploitation explosion of the 70s might never have happened if not for Mario Van Peebles' 1971 hit Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez's Blair Witch Project, George Lucas's American Graffiti, and Star Wars. All additional examples of filmmakers and films that saw their success followed by years of attempts from others to replicate what they had done. And then there's George Miller. Looking over the entire career of the Australian-born Miller, it's clear he has the sort of successful and wildly diverse filmography most filmmakers will only dream of. The supernatural comedy of Witches of Eastwick, the devastating real-life drama of Lorenzo's Oil, the heartwarming adventure of Babe, Pig in the City, and the goofy antics of the animated Happy Feet films. It's kind of hard to believe all come from the mind of one man. But of course, Miller's biggest contribution to the pop culture landscape came right from his earliest work. His debut feature, 1979's Mad Max, is the brutally violent tale of a highway patrol officer out for revenge after his family is murdered by a gang in a chaotic land on the verge of societal collapse. With its inventive camera work, high-speed chases, and incredible stunts, Mad Max was definitely a game-changer. But Miller would really revolutionize the action genre with the 1981 sequel, Mad Max 2, or, as it was retitled in America, The Road Warrior. This film saw Max begrudgingly helping a community of settlers evade a band of murderous marauders in a now fully post-apocalyptic wasteland. With even more high-octane action, now enhanced by the memorable production design and costumes of its post-apocalyptic world, the sequel was a giant success, as evidenced by the overwhelming number of imitators that immediately followed. Battle Truck, Exterminators in the Year 3000, Hell Comes to Frogtown, Steel Dawn, Wheels of Fire, 2019 After the Fall of New York, The New Barbarians. These are just a handful of the Road Warrior-inspired action fare that clogged the aisles of video stores throughout the 80s, including Miller's own third Mad Max film, 1984's Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. And yet, oddly enough, as abundant as the genre was throughout the entire decade, major Hollywood studios were hesitant to run with the trend themselves. Instead, the post-apocalyptic wasteland action film primarily remained the product of smaller independent studios and international exploitation filmmakers looking to make a quick buck in the global market. Even today, examples of big Hollywood releases that fall into this category are fairly few and far between. Resident Evil Extinction in 2007, Neil Marshall's Doomsday in 2008, the Hughes brothers' Book of Eli in 2010, and of course, Miller's own Mad Max Fury Road in 2015. But why is it that a genre that proved so profitable for so many independent and international filmmakers throughout the 80s was mostly ignored by the major Hollywood players? And why did a genre that was so dominant for a decade become far less prevalent in the 90s and early 2000s? Of course, part of the answer has to do with the overabundance of this type of movie, and the resultant audience fatigue that certainly plagued the genre by the 90s. But the odds of Hollywood being willing to revisit and reignite the post-apocalyptic action film earlier than they did certainly wasn't helped by the outcome of one of their most infamous examples of trying to do so. Because in the mid-90s, a script that had started life as another intended low-budget Mad Max ripoff was instead brought to life by a major studio. And it's safe to say, by the time it hit screens, it was no longer a low-budget production. In fact, At the time, it would be the most expensive movie ever made. The year is 1995, and Universal Pictures is hoping to recoup some of that money and launch a new franchise with Waterworld. 'All right, welcome back to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris.
Chris, before we get going, if you can just give me 1 second here, I just want to get a drink of water. All I ask is do not ask me where I'm getting this from, because I do not want to get into it.
Is this where we put in the sound of your piss hitting the toilet, or what happened?
Let's just get it out of the way, right? I know we just started, but okay, folks, we're doing Waterworld. You already know 1995's Waterworld. Whatever. We can't go any further without addressing this. We might as well just why wait? You know?
Yeah.
This is the movie where Kevin Costner drinks his own piss,
and not only drinks his own piss, but drinks his own piss as the first scene of the movie.
That's exactly why I said we should just get to it, because honestly, I feel like. So I don't know about you, but I feel like anytime I've talked about this movie with people over the last 25 years or so, it's always people are always like, oh, that's the one where he drinks his pee, right? Like that's the main thing people remember about this film, and then you watch it, you're like, oh yeah, it's the first thing they show you. That's a choice. To at this time, this was the most expensive movie ever made. Can you imagine being the studio head or just the people in charge of the money and saying, okay, we have the most expensive movie ever made. How should we start it? Let's have our leading man drink pee. The first image.
And methodically shoot the contraption, and to make it, it's like, okay, remember when Iron Man built his suit? It's like that, but now with piss everywhere. So it was just very it takes it, like you said, it's a choice to have it as your first scene. So yeah, you're right. Let's get it out of the way. He drinks his piss. It's weird. And
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
If you can pee and put it in that filtration device and make it into drinkable water, can't you just put seawater into that device and make that into drinkable water?
You're asking the wrong questions, Trev.
Yeah, okay. What are the right questions?
What else can you put in that contraption that's not fluid?
I mean, I guess the right question is, how did this movie even happen? So we want to talk about why Waterworld, right? So I don't know. What do you think of this one? This is a kind of confusing one, because I was thinking about this today, getting ready to record, and I kind of get it. It's just like, I don't know how you feel. I feel like this one, it's like, I don't think this film seems as risky as some of the other films we're going to talk about. It really does feel like something that just kind of fell apart more in the execution.
Right.
But I don't know. What do you like? I mean, obviously, I have some things to say about what led to this. We can get into a little brief mini history of it in a second. But do you look at this as just I can't believe they even bothered, or do you look at it like, no, I get where they're coming from. It just didn't turn out for them.
I mean, a little from column A, a little from column B. It is, it reeks of Mad Max ripoff. So.
For sure.
That was huge, right? So
it was specifically, so we can just probably say that right now as we bring up these elements. So Peter Rader, the writer who created this idea, he was working for New World Pictures in the 80s, which was Roger Corman's company at that point. And that was one of the many companies kind of leading the charge on just numerous Mad Max ripoffs. That was a whole genre unto itself in the 80s. Not really a lot of big studios were making them. It was really the domain of indie studios, and then a lot of foreign studios were doing these Mad Max ripoffs. Because they're not really, I mean, you can make them fairly cheap because you just need some, some dirty people in rags in the desert. But it's not as cheap as say making a zombie movie or a simple little horror, like a slasher or something, right? So they were kind of always more spectacle based indie films, but still not huge T2 level blockbusters or anything. But when he was working for New World, an executive at New World actually asked him, can you write another Mad Max ripoff? Because these are very popular right now. And he basically said, of course I'm going to not turn down a writing job, but there's so many of these. I wanted to come up with, a different concept. And so he said, well, what if instead of desert, it's water? What if we do it on water? And that instantly made Corman's company say, no, because that's super expensive. If we do it on water, that's a budget we can't deal with. So he couldn't let the idea go, though, and he wrote the script on spec, and it eventually ended up selling, to like a studio later, and then Kevin Costner and Kevin Reynolds both got their eyes on, and we'll get more to that. But it definitely, as you said, it was created to be a Mad Max ripoff for sure.
It's funny you say just get a bunch of dirty people and some desert. In this one, it's funny that it's all on water, but they still kept the dirty people. That was
it's not called Soap World; it's just Waterworld. So.
The podcast is over. But yeah, no, Rader eventually, what he wrote about, I think I saw that he wrote about 7 drafts.
7 drafts,
movie.
yeah.
7 drafts of this film. There was also a bunch of rewrites throughout, and a bunch of people got brought on. Can I bring up that right now? Is that cool?
Yeah, for sure.
I was very shocked to see that Joss Whedon spent, I think, a week, was it? Basically writing Costner's thoughts into the movie.
Yeah, he was like the on-set rewriter. He was brought on like during production, and he calls it like one of his most miserable experiences, because he said he was basically he thought he was going to actually come on and do like actual script doctoring, which I knew this, and I'm sure you did already too, is because we're both Whedon fans. Mm-hmm. But he was like a huge script doctor in the 90s.
Yeah,
like there's so many movies that you don't realize have Whedon in them. This is another one he was brought on, but whereas he usually could get his little like quippy one-liners and things in, this one was literally just Kevin Costner telling him what to write and him transcribing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of a weird one, even though knowing his involvement in the industry, but it just seemed like this one was kind of plagued with a lot of issues. Obviously, that seems to be a running theme in a lot of what we're going to talk. A lot of this podcast in general is just these movies went through a ton of production issues, but this one more than even the last 2 episodes that we did, and more so than usual. It was well documented.
Yeah.
So much so that there was a bunch of articles that we were looking through in prep, and really specific quotes, even like from the filmmakers and Kevin Costner himself, and talking shit. And it's just that doesn't happen anymore, especially in publications in 2020.
Or it happens differently, which we'll talk about a little later, because I definitely think there was like a different vibe around this one. I'll tell you what, though, going back to, because you mentioned how there were so many rewrites, despite the fact that tons of different writers ended up taking a crack at this, the ultimate build writing credits are just Peter Rader and David Twohy, who I quite like David Twohy, actually.
What has he written again?
He did like the Riddick movies.
Yes.
So
Yes.
And he wrote The Arrival, which is a pretty decent little alien movie, and not the Villeneuve one, but the old Charlie Sheen one. And he also did A Perfect Getaway, which is a movie I like a lot, with Timothy Olyphant and Mila Jovovich.
You love your Jovovich.
I do love Jovovich. Yeah.
You can't have enough Jovovich.
You can never have enough Jovovich. But in doing the research, I don't know. Again, I'm curious if you agree. I really ended up kind of liking Peter Rader, because it was interesting to see his attitude about this film is really good, I think, for as like stressful as it must have been, obviously. But I also really liked that in doing the research, I noticed that he was very complimentary to some of the other writers. You talked about he was kind of surprised that he was a new guy in Hollywood. The spec script he wrote, it sold. He was very excited, obviously. Oh my God, this idea I had is gonna get turned into a giant Kevin Costner movie. And he basically said, he's like, I didn't know I could ever be replaced. I just assumed I would be the writer all the way to the end. But he actually gives credit where credit is due to like the ideas that weren't his. He talks about how David Twohy is the one who came up with the idea of making the hero into a mutant. That was not part of his original idea.
Right.
And I always thought it was cool to see a writer who's not bitter about getting kind of taken off the process. And he still seems very proud of it all. And, I just wanted to highlight that for a moment in case he's listening, because maybe he's got like a Waterworld Google alert and he's listening. Good on you, Peter Rader. I think he came up with an idea that had a lot of potential. And I think in a moment we'll say like, maybe it's not the most amazing original script, but I don't think the faults of this ultimately fall on the writing level so much.
No, No, the least of its issues is the writing, I would say.
Yeah. And then it's like everything when I'm thinking about like why, because like ultimately I guess the question that focuses around this one is not so much why was this movie made, but why were they willing to sink so much money into it?
Sink so much money?
Pun. Not. I wasn't conscious of it, but I'll just say it was intended. But I mean, like everything I think of comes with a caveat because I was thinking, well, Kevin Costner was a huge star at this time. Mm-hmm. And this is like, so I'm a little older than you. I remember the
you're
glory days.
You're a lot older than me.
Okay. All right. Calm down. I remember the glory days of Kevin Costner. You and I have often talked about how movie stars, that's kind of a dead idea nowadays, right? And we say how Tom Cruise is still like the last movie star. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because they were both movie stars at like the same time. But I think even like young people are still cognizant of Tom Cruise as a movie star. But people just think Kevin Costner is kind of this old, grizzled character actor now, right?
Totally.
But man, in the late 80s, early 90s, Kevin Costner was about as big as it gets. I mean, so you look at this, like, I'm not going to mention everything he's in because some of them aren't huge hits. But I mean, this run, when you go from 1987, he stars in The Untouchables. 1980, he also does No Way Out, which, is not as big, but has a nice cult following. Mm-hmm. In 88, he does Bull Durham and Field of Dreams, two of the most popular, successful baseball films of all time. Field of Dreams, just a cultural phenomenon, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He does Revenge in 1990, which again, it's okay. I like that movie, but I don't think it was a huge hit. But then in 1990, Dances with Wolves, bam, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Giant hit, box office and Oscar success. He wins Best Director, big hit. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves in 1991, giant hit.
Yep.
JFK, also in 91, pretty big deal. 1992, The Bodyguard, humongous.
Holy shit! When you list them off like this, that's
the
quite
run,
shocking, actually.
That run, I mean, he was the biggest star in the world for sure. And then so in my head I was just thinking, for some reason I thought Waterworld fed right off of that, mm-hmm. But actually he kind of did need a hit when Waterworld came along because then he goes into a run of. In 93, he does A Perfect World, the Clint Eastwood film, which I think is amazing. And I think it's one of the most underrated movies Clint Eastwood has ever done. From what I understand, it's very well respected and very revered in Europe. And for some reason, it just never kind of caught on like it should have in America. But if anybody hasn't seen A Perfect World, definitely watch it. Fantastic movie. Costner's great in it. Eastwood's great in it. So well directed. One of the best. I'd put it in the top 5 of Eastwood's films. Then he does Wyatt Earp in 1994, which bombs. Probably because Tombstone steals its thunder and is much better.
Right.
Also 94 does a film called The War, which I only remember in that it was like, it didn't do very well. I couldn't even tell you what that is. I know it's him and like Elijah Wood. But so like Waterworld actually did kind of need to be a comeback for him. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, we can talk about it. It kind of was. I don't know. This is interesting because this isn't a film that's a giant failure. It's just not a film that was successful enough, I suppose. Yeah. The thing is, so I know I'm rambling, but the point I want to make here is that, so I think it makes sense that they were willing to look at this movie as like, well, Kevin Costner, this could be the next big one. He had that giant run just a few years ago. This could be another one.
Yeah, he's due for something.
He's due for something, but ultimately this instead ends up becoming the movie that highlights everything wrong about Kevin Costner, right? As as a film in filmmaking terms, mm-hmm. And so this really ends up kind of being the beginning of the end for him in a way. Not to say he never had any more hits because he has a couple, but he never regains that star status to the same level. And I think it can be traced to starting here with Waterworld and specifically all the behind the scenes brouhaha.
Well, and that's the thing. This was a major black eye to his mm-hmm. career, but also his kind of personality. And I think coming off of, I completely forgot that he directed Dances with Wolves, by the way. Mm-hmm. So, I mean,
which is great. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. But coming off from that and then another huge movie and kind of handing the reins off to somebody else seems to have been his biggest problem. He doesn't seem like he can do that. He can't just be the star of the movie. He needs to kind of have his hand in all the cookie jars, and that's what it kind of felt like. And it was like you're saying, it was we both said it's well documented that the problems were awry, and they were all over the news. There was more talk about the budget inflating than the actual hype for the movie itself. That's what it felt like from the discussion pre-release. What is it here? I think Universal had authorized $100 million. Well, no, actually, way less than $100 million, but it was ballooning to $100 million.
Yeah, I think it was initially thought of as like perhaps $60 million.
Yeah,
and then that was clearly like no way, especially when they made a decision to not, to film it in like actual ocean and not just a water tank somewhere.
Well, and like $100 million, like to people that, I mean, I'm sure most people listening to this podcast like know a lot of the movie industry, but just in general, $100 million now doesn't sound like a lot. Like fucking 3 people in a house talking is $100 million today. But $100 million back in 94 was just outrageous. And it actually ballooned to, by the end of it, the shoot sounded like it was about a year long, by the way. Yeah. And typically a movie shoots in about 3 months, 3 to 4 months. This took a year to film. And yeah, it ballooned to just under $200 million.
Yeah, different numbers kind of get floated around, but it seems like the ultimate, it's somewhere between 175 and 180 is what I kind of seem like it settles on.
Yeah, and like that's spectacular.
Well, as I said, at that time, it was the most expensive film ever made, and that was definitely what all the talk was about when it came out. I think I was trying to remember, and I do think so. I was, what did it come? Was it a summer film? So I was probably 14 when this came out, but I definitely remember this being one of the first movies where I was aware of that kind of that talk about a film, right? Because it used to be like, well, just some movies were big and some were small, but you weren't aware of budget and things like that.
Totally.
But I do remember, like, all people talk about Waterworld was, oh my God, this budget, man. It's like so gigantic and all the problems they had. And you just couldn't avoid it.
Well, and it's even, you had mentioned before about the decision to film on water. Like, this is the thing, like, in the ocean. Like, so, again, a movie like this with a lot of water scenes is typically being filmed on like a set in like a big pool in the back of Universal Studios. If you've ever been on the tour at Universal Studios, you'll usually see that big pool that most of these movies use. But Kevin Costner was adamant about going out into the ocean. And actually, Steven Spielberg had said, fucking don't do that. Yep. Absolutely do not do that. And of course, you don't listen to Steven Spielberg. So they did it anyways. And I guess Kevin Costner was on set for like 160 days, working 6 days a week, constantly. And in the middle of the goddamn ocean. So much so that he got... you obviously read about the time that he was... Okay, there's a shot in the movie where Kevin Costner's like fucking 60 feet in the air, okay? And he's standing on like the pole of his little, sailboat. And it's a pretty wide shot, and it's definitely Kevin Costner. And I was sitting back being like, that doesn't seem safe. And that's pretty crazy that they put Kevin Costner, like this gigantic movie star, on the top like that. Well, it turns out that he kind of floated off, and they had to kind of like go rescue him. Mm-hmm. He almost got lost at sea. And he's not the only one. His co-stars almost died. There was a bunch of stunt people that almost died. It was just, like we said, the least of the problems was the script. If you were involved with Waterworld production, you were like literally getting your, taking your life in your own hands a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you definitely if when Steven Spielberg is offering you filmmaking advice, you should listen to it, unless he's telling you to fire Megan Fox because of a dumb joke. But other than that, you should listen to him. And he was very aware from all the problems he had with Jaws, and maybe that was the thing. Maybe he said that to them, and they're like, he's like, don't film in water, and they're like, why? He's like, because I had a bad time on Jaws. And like, oh, Jaws, the gigantic movie that changed Hollywood forever. Yeah, we think we'll risk it, but
totally.
But just like obviously this film is even more water based than Jaws because guess what? Every scene's on water. That's why it's called Waterworld, in case you haven't figured that out yet. Just a giant headache, and I mean, I can only imagine, because you always hear there's those axioms about what not to do in making a movie, and filming on water is one of them. Don't work with kids and animals and all this stuff. But and then of course there's a kid in this too. And I mean, I guess Kevin Costner counts as animal because he's half man, half fish. So it's the trifecta of things not to do.
It was all the worst decisions you could possibly make.
And then you think, well, okay, it's okay though, because the director will bring in to helm this, because obviously this is going to be a gigantic nightmare.
Yep.
Well, we'll get someone who's worked with Kevin Costner multiple times. Like, obviously it'll be fine then, right? Problem. These guys are friends in name only, it sure seems like, because this is a very contentious, it was already a contentious relationship. So we're talking about Kevin Reynolds, who is the credited director on this film. Let's talk about Kevin Reynolds for a moment. He's kind of responsible for Kevin Costner's career. Not completely. Like, Kevin Costner was in some films before Reynolds blew him up, but Kevin Costner's first big role is in Fandango, which I believe is Kevin Reynolds' second film, maybe first or second film. And they stay in touch. Now, here's where we start to get into some problems, because they remain good friends. And then when Costner's directing Dance with Wolves, he brings Reynolds in for some help, because he's kind of, he's like, I'm this directing thing's kind of new to me. And he brings Reynolds in. Reynolds apparently helps a lot, to the point of almost being like, I don't want to say like a second director, but does quite a bit to guide him along.
Right.
But Costner does not thank him at the Oscars. Nor do I believe does Reynolds get any like actual credit on the film. But that's okay, whatever. I guess he's probably just like, well, people forget to thank people at the Oscars all the time, right? So then he directs him in Robin Hood the next year, Prince of Thieves. And it does not go well. On the set, they are often clashing. They have a lot of disagreements about whether Costner should do an accent or not, which is clear when you watch the film because it kind of comes and goes throughout the movie. Reynolds ends up kind of like walking away from the film during post-production, just gets frustrated during the editing process and just like leaves. But that's a giant hit. But still, the relationship is soured. They don't know if they want to work together, and the producers of Waterworld convince them to sit down, hash it out. They kind of both agree, but it sounds like as soon as filming starts, all the same problems rear their head. And these guys they said they're kind of cordial on set, but things are always really tense. They're not like, they're kind of getting along differently now. And then, I guess we can just say it now. Kevin Reynolds, again, for the second time, we did it with Robin Hood, and I just with this one. He basically just walks away from the film in post-production and editing. And Kevin Costner takes over the editing. And essentially, if you believe that axiom that like a film is made 3 times, right, in the writing and the filming and the editing, he's the last person who made this movie, because he's the one who is in charge of like the final version we watch. Now, I do know that it was just within the last year or so, Arrow Films put out a big Blu-ray set of Waterworld that has the 2-hour and 40-minute cut, which I guess would be closer to Reynolds' original cut. I have not watched it. I don't know if I ever will.
No.
But yeah, so that's the little backstory on those two. It's just interesting. They eventually, so this was they had like 2 falling outs, like a big one on Robin Hood and then another one on this one, 2 right in a row. But not right in a row, a couple years apart. But long time they don't talk to each other, and then they finally make up. And I guess they did finally in 2012 work together again on the Hatfields and McCoys. But yeah, I don't know. Not even people who like would be considered, his good friend are safe from the wrath of Kevin Costner.
Well, and that's kind of one of our favorite quotes is from an Entertainment Weekly article. Reynolds told them, in the future, Costner should only appear in movies he directs himself. That way he can always be working with his favorite actor and his favorite director.
So good.
It was perfect. Costner did respond to that, just being like, at the end of the day, you've got to get the work done, and that's what I'm about. And it wasn't as fun, but...
Yeah, but that's the interesting thing about this film. If people get interested from listening to us talk about it, if you go look this up, like I said, there's a lot of articles that were published. We're not even talking about retrospective articles. Articles at the time where these 2 men, to both their credits, they did not hide behind publicists. They did not try to keep any of this stuff secret. They were both very open about the nightmare this film was, the disagreements they had, how they were no longer getting along. It's pretty impressive to read that level of honesty, because I think we talk about how everyone's very aware of what a mess like the Disney Star Wars movies were, right? But Disney just keeps that under such lock and key, and we never get to hear all these stories. And then the fact that as this film was coming out, all these stories were public. That's kind of cool, and it makes our job easier.
Yeah, absolutely. It was research for this didn't take long.
No.
I foresee it harder for other movies, but this one, yeah, it was the quotes, everything. There was even stuff that I learned that, this is maybe more gossipy, but it did seem like this was the movie that kind of ended Kevin Costner's like personal marital status. Did you read about that too?
Yeah, so he was also like he was going through a very public divorce during this film, and there was some rumors about him possibly having an affair with someone on the set.
Yeah.
I didn't really look into who that was because I don't care. First of all, it's 25 years ago. I also don't give a crap about celebrity gossip in general.
But I was bringing up more in the sense that he is, which we'll get into when we talk about what went wrong in the film. Kevin Costner seems like pretty pissed off in the movie.
Yeah.
And I can see like maybe some personal life plus the issues with Reynolds just all coming together in this crescendo of just kind of anger in the movie. So sometimes it feels like maybe it's coming out there, but we'll get into that. I did reading that later, like maybe I'm stretching, but it definitely he seems, I don't know, he's not having a good time.
Maybe that might be like a good transition, because what more is there to say about this? Like, why did they make this film? Well, like I said, I mean, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's shocking, yes, that so much money went into it, but that wasn't the original plan. And I guess we can also just quickly address. So this is a unique one in that if you go into the research on this, you won't find a lot of talk about this having planned sequels. The closest you kind of get to is that not too long ago, I think about 8 or 9 years ago, there was some talk of the Sci-Fi Channel doing a new, like either a sequel miniseries or maybe trying to do like a TV show of it. And that's apparently is because every time Sci-Fi Channel airs Waterworld, it pulls good ratings. So Sci-Fi kind of looked at it like, well, this, and Sci-Fi is owned by NBC Universal, so it's already a Universal property, so it's it's something they have the rights to, or could easily get access to. And so to them, they're like, maybe a Waterworld like miniseries or something wouldn't be a bad idea, but that just kind of never happens.
Right.
But we've already had like a couple of people say, well, Waterworld, was there really supposed to be sequels to that? And like what ultimately complicates this is Costner himself is always on record as saying he never wanted to do a sequel. He never thought of this as like there being sequels, and he says like, well, I don't do sequels just in general, right? Like sequels, I don't know, Well, first of all, Mr. Costner, some point in the future, we're going to do another one of your movies, which disproves that you are against sequels, because I have multiple articles with you talking about how you're excited to do sequels to this other film. So I don't really believe that. I think it's a lot of, I think it's after the fact. I think Waterworld was such a miserable experience for him that I'm sure once it was done, he was like, no, there's no need for any more. And I will say, I honestly do believe that while this was being filmed and everything was going out of control and the budget was ballooning, I'm sure at that point Universal was like, Jesus, we just need to get this movie out. They just wanted to wash their hands of it. But I don't believe for a second, again, I guess, but I don't believe for a second when they signed on to this movie, they weren't thinking about the franchise potential, because it's all over this film. And that's kind of proven by the fact that, so this is actually one of the first movies that ever comes out with a video game tie-in at the same time. The same year it comes out, they open up the Waterworld Stunt Spectacular at their theme parks, which at that point there was a Miami Vice like action spectacular, it was called, and they just take that and they turn it into the Waterworld, a live Sea War spectacular. And I mean, so they were clearly like thinking about the big potential of this film. So I would say it's a pretty safe bet that if this had been like a giant hit, whether with Costner or not, we would have got more Waterworlds. Well,
and we had mentioned in our introductions episode and just kind of telling what the show is about. A lot of these films that we are going to talk about end the same way, as like they're ready for their next adventure. And well, spoilers, this movie ends exactly like that. So anybody who says this isn't there wasn't even a thought of it it's kind of horseshit.
To be fair, this movie ends the way every Mad Max movie ends, because they just took the Mad Max script and alt-deleted wherever it said desert and they put in water. But
yeah, that's a very good point. That's a good point.
But yeah, let's segue into talking about the film itself.
The future. The polar ice caps have melted, and the Earth lies beneath a watery grave. Those who survived have adapted to a new world.
What did you see out there in your 15 lunars?
Such as?
An end? An end to all this water?
You're asking the wrong person.
Pure dirt.
So what's it worth? We trading or not?
And the human dream is the search for a mythical place called dry land.
It doesn't exist!
How can you be sure?
Because I sailed farther than most have dreamed. I've never seen it.
This place, this whole way of living, it's ending.
Straight line leading directly to dry land.
Dry land is not just our destination, but it is our destiny!
Universal Pictures presents a world unlike any you have ever seen. Kevin Costner, Dennis Hopper, Gene Triplehorn. Waterworld.
In a future where the polar ice caps have melted and Earth is almost entirely submerged, a mutated anti-hero known as the Mariner reluctantly helps a woman and a young girl try to find dry land, while also evading a group of pirates known only as the Smokers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that's Waterworld.
It pretty much is. That is Waterworld. Now take that and stretch it out to 135 minutes.
Yeah.
And you have Waterworld. So I saw this movie in the theater in 1995 and never again until yesterday. I was surprised by how much of it I did remember, but it's somewhat telling. So I don't know. I want to hear what you think about it, but I will say I was really hoping, because you know how sometimes you see a movie and you don't think much of it, and then you return to it later in life and you have kind of a new appreciation for it.
Yes.
That's really what I was hoping for this film, because I know this film actually has gained quite a following in the years since it came out. I guess the nice, if there's a success story to Waterworld, it's that, first of all, it wasn't a giant failure financially. It wasn't a hit, but it's not like, we're not talking like a John Carter here or anything, you know. And it does well on video. As we said, it plays well on TV for years afterwards. And like it has found a following. And so I was thinking this might be one of those cases where, also just recently you and I have been doing, and a couple of other friends have been doing, a weekly movie night where we've been watching a lot of 90s action films. And that's been like a very pleasant surprise to go back and revisit some of these. And like, Universal Soldier, a great example of one that I hadn't watched in years, and watched it again. It's like, wow, this is even better than I remember it being.
Absolutely.
I sat down to watch Waterworld very open to the possibility that, you know what, maybe I was just like, maybe I bought into the bad buzz about it when it came out. And this is actually going to be like way more fun than I remember it being. No.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a quote from Roger Ebert that actually it kind of really succincts everything that I think about the movie in just like a couple sentences. So if you don't mind, I'd like to read it.
No, for sure.
So Roger Ebert gave Waterworld 2.5 stars out of 4 and said, "The cost controversy aside, Waterworld is a decent futuristic action picture with some great sets, some intriguing ideas, and a few images that will stay with me. It could have been more. It could have been better. It could have made me care about the characters. It's one of those marginal pictures you're not unhappy to have seen, but can't quite recommend."
That's perfect.
Yeah, I read that and I was like, fucking, that's me. That's
yeah.
I watched this for the first time like 6 years ago, but I think I had it more like kind of a background movie, to be totally honest with you. And I thought it was junk. It was one of those movies that I was like, this is crap. So revisiting it this last weekend, kind of more, with a fine-tooth comb and actually paying more attention, I thought it was fine, but definitely boring. But some stuff that I really did actually love is the practical effects are amazing. The attack scene on their little villa or wherever they're at, I can't remember the name of it, but the main like hub, asshole. It's phenomenal. Like it's amazing. Like the effects work are fantastic. The explosions are real, incredible. It does look like all these people are in danger, and like we saw or what we read, they were in danger.
Yeah.
But I was just more like kind of confused by what the fuck the movie is in a weird way. We had mentioned a couple times already that Kevin Costner or the Mariner is a mutant or something, and it's kind of out of nowhere, and it is kind of stupid in a weird way. Like, I mean, I liked it, but they don't do anything with it, so it's like, well, what the fuck is it here for? And then there's like a mystery of a certain tattoo that I was like, what the fuck is this tattoo? Like, it just feels like, again, like what Ebert said, I just could have cared more. I just couldn't care less about what was kind of happening, but a lot of the spectacle did really work for me. I'm not going to lie about that. I really thought the spectacle was phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, the money is on the screen. I don't know if all the money's on the screen necessarily, but I mean, it definitely, like, it looks like an expensive movie. And as we've said, watching a lot of these other 90s films, the coolest thing about this movie is watching this and being like, wow, that's all practical.
Yeah.
And just thinking about how this movie today would be such a CGI, you know, I mean, everything would be filmed in front of blue screens, and all the underwater effects of, you know, it'd be like Aquaman, right? Where it'd just be such a made in a stage kind of movie. And it is pretty cool to watch it and realize that, oh, they did this for real. And they said the production design's pretty great. The look of the world, you know, it's very Mad Max-ish, but, you know, whatever. I accept that going in. And I was actually, I'd say, pee drinking in the first 10 seconds aside, I was fairly on board for the first 15 or 20 minutes or so. You know, the initial like sequence of him salvaging stuff and then going to the atoll, you know, and like the first kind of initial action scene there, all pretty good. It's a good opening act. And then it just like once him, Helen and the little girl, Enola, once they escape the atoll. So we're, you know, so in the opening act, the Mariner, his whole thing is he's just this kind of like he's Mad Max. I mean, he's out on his own, but because he has gills, he can dive to the bottom of the ocean and spend as long down there as he wants. And he actually will dive down and kind of scavenge stuff from the old world, because again, this is the polar ice caps have melted, and what we know as Earth is all, you know, miles underwater now. And he goes down and he finds stuff, brings it up to the surface, and he'll take it to these floating atolls and trade it for, you know, plants or whatever he needs. And he goes to this atoll, and they kind of find out he's a mutant, take him prisoner. That whole thing is that's kind of weird too. First they ask him if he can like sleep with their daughters. Yeah, it was
very strange. There's a few times where women are offered up as transactional.
Yeah, we'll get into one of those in a moment. But they take him prisoner, and then while he's prisoner, the smokers show up and attack the atoll, because there's this story about how this little girl in the atoll has this tattoo on her back that tells where dry land is. So dry land.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna cut you off here. They never explicitly say that, right?
It's never.
Am
say
I crazy?
What?
Like I was thinking the whole time. Like the tattoo to me was never. Was it hinted as a map? Did I just miss that? Or
well, there's this scene like in the little store where the main like the main sidekick to the deacon is talking to that guy who lives in the atoll, and the guy's telling him about this girl, and he says like, and then he points to the girl and says, "That's the one." And he's talking about there's something like she has knowledge of like where dry land is or something. I'm not sure if they ever say it's like a tattoo, but we know the Mariner sees the tattoo pretty early on,
right?
And I think it's just, and I do want to talk about this tattoo because I got some issues, but
yeah.
But the whole point is just I was just trying to explain this whole sequence. So they have the Mariner in a cage, and then the smokers attack, and you know he basically says, you know, like or he doesn't say anything, but like Helen agrees to let him out if he'll get her and the girl out of there. And that's the first big action sequence, and it's pretty awesome. Like everything there is really cool. And then once him and Helen and Enola, the girl, are out on the ocean, it just grinds to a halt. And it never recovers. And here's the thing. So you mentioned this earlier too, and this is the thing I thought I would have a different opinion about this time, and I'll tell you why. Because I was thinking back to what's my main memory of this film from when I saw it when I was 14. And what I remember thinking is I didn't like the Mariner. I just didn't find him I just didn't find him to be a likable hero. And then I haven't seen it in years, and you know, so some of it kind of left my memory. But I was thinking about how like, well, Max isn't really always a likable character, right? There's every Mad Max film has that idea where he starts as like this grumpy loner, and he kind of finds his humanity, you know, slightly as the film goes along through helping people. And that's like the same character arc, right? And I was thinking, well, it's probably that in this too, right? So maybe I was just like, I didn't get it the first time I saw it. And it is, But I think you hit on it. Costner just doesn't perform it well enough, or because like
No.
he's just so miserable in this film that you never like him. And even though they do, like, even though on paper he eventually starts acting like he's like a father figure to the girl, it never gets sold in a way. And he's just an ass. This whole movie.
He's a fucking piece of shit in this movie. And I was like, he is honestly one of the most unlikable heroes I've seen in a major motion picture.
And that's a giant problem. You can just never get invested in it because you don't care about him, and Helen and Enola aren't really interesting enough either.
No. Like
the only time character-wise this movie, I'm sorry, there's one line. The only time the movie ever comes alive character-wise is obviously whenever Dennis Hopper's on screen.
Oh, absolutely. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows the kind of movie he's in. And also, I completely forgot he was in this movie. And I love when a Dennis Hopper shows up and he just goes all full villain. So he's worth it. He does a great job. He knows exactly what he's doing. Kevin Costner, however, is trying to be Mad Max, but also trying to be kind of swashbuckling. And it never comes together in a full cohesive performance. And like I said, there's a scene in this movie that really, it's the moment that I was like, oh, okay, I'll never like this guy. And it's not the scene where he smacks Helen with an oar, but it's the scene where he attacks Helen, throws her to the ground, and cuts her hair off. And I was like, what the fuck am I watching? It was so like gross and weird and super aggressive. And then it's played for a humorous moment because the kid, Enola's like, hey, fuck you, don't do that to Helen. I love her. And then it cuts to them, Helen and Enola sitting there. And now the kid's hair is cut too. So now I know that the Mariner has pinned these two girls down and cut their hair against their will. And I'm just like, oh, okay. It was a choice.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you mentioned this earlier. I mean, probably the low point of the film for multiple reasons, just for like, oh god, but also because it's like this. It's like a sequence that just could be removed. I'm sure they would argue it's in there for like character growth or whatever. But the Kim Coates scene, because this scene just like drags the film down so much because it's so long and just so like. First of all, I forgot that Kim Coates was in this, and it was
which scene is this again?
So he's the drifter that comes on.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like because like Kim Coates is one of those actors who I kind of forget that he's been around for so long because he didn't really have his breakout until Sons of Anarchy, like just a few years ago, right? But he's like, he pops up in this as this like this drifter guy in a boat that boards, and he has paper, and the Mariner really wants the paper just because he's kind of fascinated by it. And he says, well, what do you want? And Kim Coates says, give me the woman. And he does. He says like, take her. Now there's one little moment there, and it's like, I don't know, it's so gross, but it's like they have it in there for like, oh, he's not all bad, I guess. Cause the drifter guy's like, well, I'll give even more if you also give me like the little girl. And at least the Mariner's like, no on that, right? And you're like,
yeah.
Oh, well, thanks, movie, for that, at least,
Yeah.
But he just totally lets him take Helen down below, and then of course they have the thing where he changes his mind and comes down and kills the guy. But it's just like the whole sequence is like, why is this in here? Like it's so long too, and it adds nothing because this guy's not involved with the other bad guys, and it's just it's when you're already starting to feel the length of the movie, and this is not helping. It's just fascinating how slow this movie gets. And just like never picks up pace.
Yeah, that could have. There was a very misguided scene. Just like you said, it can be completely removed. That happens in a lot of movies, so it's like not a problem. But this one was just kind of so gross that it was like, And like you said, the Mariner's a good guy because he puts his foot down on child fucking. So okay, fair enough. It was just very. I don't know. I think he's just really. The failure of this movie comes down to the Mariner. It really does. I just could not get on board with anything he was doing. He was just a complete and utter asshole. And when he turns into that father figure. By the way, this is where it's really stupid. Trev, what's the name of this movie called?
Waterworld.
Okay, all right. Now, if there is one skill you should maybe have naturally or been taught or whatever, if there's one skill you should have in Waterworld, what do you think it should be?
Drinking pee.
Okay, that's number 3 on the list.
Okay.
but number 1 through 2. No, but like it's swimming. There's a scene where the Mariner takes the kid because he's pissed off at the kid and tosses the kid in the water. Like just like, fuck you, I'm just done with you. And Helen screams, "Oh no, she can't swim." And it just completely ripped me out of the movie. I'm like, this is such a manufactured I can't even speak. It's such a manufactured sense of drama to, we got to save the kid. And then it comes back when the mariner's like, I'll teach the kid to swim. Mm-hmm. And that's when I'll be the father figure. Number one, it makes no sense that you're teaching this kid how to swim in Waterworld. And number two, you've cut their hair off. You've offered up Helen as fucking just a transactional lay. You've beaten them up a couple times. There's just nothing redeeming. Okay, so he takes the kid on a little stroll in the water for a bit. It's just not enough. It's not enough for me to get back on board. And it sounds like I'm really like shitting on him, but I really did. I was just really turned off by this point.
Well, what's funny about that moment too is so they sell that where like Helen is like asleep on the boat. And she wakes up and hears some splashing, and she goes to look, and it's him with Enola in the water, and him teaching her how to swim. And Helen gets this like look on her face, like, oh, I love this guy now. He's like taking my little adoptive daughter. And I was thinking, like, yeah, you could have done this at any time. You could have taught her swim. Yeah. As a matter of fact, you should have a long time ago, because you, again, as you said, you live in Waterworld. You also know how important she is. You're very aware of like what she means to everybody. So you'd think just in terms of keeping her safe, you would have taught her to swim. He's not doing anything you couldn't do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
He's not special to do that.
And then in a moment that like makes Helen unlikable to me, I don't know, maybe this is unfair. I don't know. But let's talk about the sex scene in this. And let's specifically talk about where it falls. So there's a sequence early in the film where to kind of try and get the mariner to chill, because he's being such a dick to both of them, Helen offers herself to the mariner sexually. She tells Enola, like, go below deck, don't listen. And then she like takes off her clothes, and they have the mariner, like, you can see him considering it for a moment.
Yep.
And then he just walks away. And again, I guess it's supposed to be a moment where we're like, what a hero, Mm-hmm. And then, he basically says something like, you don't really want it. So, of course, because it's a Hollywood movie, these two do end up hooking up. But the problem is where it falls. It falls immediately after Enola is kidnapped by the smokers. Yeah. She is taken prisoner. That is their number one priority. And Helen's response about, I guess in the timeline of the film, which I would assume would be about 10 minutes later, she turns to the mariner and says, "When I offered myself to you, why didn't you take me?" And he says, "Because you didn't really want it." And then she kind of leans in and is like, she doesn't say it, but she might as well be like, "Well, I want it now." Yep. And that's when they have sex, and it's like, your daughter just got kidnapped, and this is like you're horny for the mariner. Like, it was so weird. It almost made it feel like it made that feel like oddly transactional. Mm-hmm. Like, well, I got to sleep with this guy for him to go save my daughter, but that's like not what the movie's telling us at this point, because he's supposed to care. I don't know. It was just such a weird placement. It was like, I don't like either of them right now. Why are they doing this? Go save the girl. What are you doing?
Yep. There's some great nudity on her, though. No. There's one backside shot, and
or at least her body double.
Yeah, praise be. And after that possibly transactional sex scene, let's catch up with the smokers, the bad guys, and they've set. Is this before that? No, they set that trap first, and then that's what happened, right? They set the trap, get the kid, they sleep together, and then he's like, "I gotta go, man. I gotta go get her."
Well, yeah, because now we're like racing into our third act, which man, there's how much I always think about like what the filmmakers are thinking, like when I'm watching a movie sometime, about like patting themselves on the back and being so proud of themselves. Mm-hmm. And the sequence where Enola is like giving the speech about the mariner as he's like coming to the ship and like starting to take out the men, it was just such a, that the people behind the movie were like, this is badass, man. Oh, yeah. This is like this is the sequence everyone's going to talk about. This is going to be like legendary. But it's like, I mean, kid actors are always a mixed bag, right? So like the monologue's not delivered with like enough menace to be cool, and the dialogue is kind of heavy-handed, and also like what we're seeing him do isn't like really that cool. So like the sequence doesn't play nearly as awesome as they thought it was. But since you brought up the smokers, we did mention how Dennis Hopper is actually pretty awesome in this. Mm-hmm. The smokers are like a weird. Everything's weird in this movie, I guess. It's a strange film, but they're called the smokers because they all smoke. Mm-hmm. That's their currency. Did you think that was weird? Because, cigarettes are a pretty finite resource. And considering this is supposed to be hundreds of years in the future, the fact that they still have so many packs of cigarettes to kind of pass around, I don't know if I buy into the logic of that. I know I'm talking about logic in Waterworld, but
Right.
just struck me as a little odd thing.
But I'm a stickler for this too, though. I think if you build a world, you better think of everything. Because it makes. I was thinking the exact same thing. I was like, there's way too many cigarettes. Like, if they can't they can't find dirt, but they have an infinite supply of, like, where the fuck were all of them? Like, where were they all? Like, I guess were they on the Exxon Valdez where they're little where they're stationed? It was just very strange. There was way too many cigarettes, and it didn't really make any sense. But
I did because you mentioned, I actually do legit love the detail that their ship is the Exxon Valdez.
Yeah, that was fun.
I thought that was great, and I even love that the actual captain of the Exxon Valdez, they have that picture of him, and they kind of talk to it like, and I think Dennis Hopper calls him like Saint Hazelwood or something. Like they kind of like worship him. I thought that was pretty great because this wasn't that long after the Exxon Valdez disaster. So,
and for anybody wondering about the Exxon Valdez and what that was, he was the captain of it. It was the Joseph Jeffrey Hazelwood, and he was drunk,
Yep.
and he was like one of the biggest oil spills of all time.
Yep.
In 1989. So that was pretty hilarious that the villain looked up to this moron. I did like that detail too.
Probably my favorite scene in the movie is in the initial action sequence, the Deacon, which is Dennis Hopper's character, gets blown up, loses an eye, and there is a great sequence after that where they replace his eye with a little like a marble. And you get to the sequence of like his little henchman like painting it, and that's actually pretty good comedy when Dennis Hopper asks all his underlings like how does it look, and they're like, oh, it looks great, and I think one of them says like, looks even better than your real eye. that was pretty funny. And then the moment where it's like the other guy walks in and Dennis Hopper turns to speak to him and his eye like goes flying out and rolls across the floor. That's all good stuff. Like that, the movie needed to be that goofy, at all times.
And exactly, that's why it hits it slams on the brakes every time we get back to the Mariner on his little sailboat.
Yep.
It's actually fun being around the smokers, and in a weird way, do you really see them as the bad guy? Like, other than stealing the kid or whatever, like, okay, fair enough, and maybe wanting to chop that
like
tattoo
intention.
off.
Their intention is the same as the heroes, right? And you completely understand it. Of course, everybody wants to get to dry land.
Yeah, and are they being kind of ruthless about it? Sure.
Yeah, but you also have to wonder. I mean, I don't know for sure. They don't seem like they're the bad guys because the movie tells us they're the bad guys.
Totally.
But let's just say, like, if Helen and Enola said to them, like, "Hey, just leave us alone, and we'll give you access to the map, and we can all go to dry land together," maybe they'd be okay with that. Now, maybe they just don't want to be on the island with these guys. I don't necessarily blame them. But yeah, I don't know. It's odd. I do love, again, I love that they have a car on the Exxon Valdez that they drive around just from room to room.
Yeah, that's fun.
I love that the movie actually plays the Peter Gunn music during that sequence. Like, yeah, like it just like all these like cool choices that you wish like the rest of the movie had that sense of fun to it.
Yeah, it's not nearly as silly as it should be. So when those silly moments happen, it's like a breath of fresh air.
The old man who like lives in the oil in like the fuel tanks.
When it gets blown up, doesn't he say thanks or something?
Yeah, so he says like thank God because he just lives down there and does nothing else.
I love that. That was really fun. And again,
or when Dennis Hopper like throws his cigarette and the guy has to catch it before it goes in there. Like it's all that's all great.
And again, the spectacle is pretty great. Like there's other than the weird montage of Kevin Costner walking away from dead bodies. That's all it looked like. It didn't look like he was doing anything special. But when it gets to the explosions and the ship blowing up and everything looked really good. Like it felt it was fun. I like that stuff. The climax of the movie, it did work for me. And
on an action level, I do like if there's a moment where the Mariner is actually kind of cool, it is when he just actually does throw the flare down the pipe and like just blow up the ship. Like that stuff does play. It's just, so I guess the movie's like bookended by good action, and just like the problem is the books in between are the most boring books ever written.
Well, and that's why like that Ebert quote, I just wish it was better. I'm in for the first 20 and I'm in for the last 20. So it's this weird movie that you don't really want to recommend to anybody because you got to go through this fucking slog of an hour and a half, it feels like. In the middle.
Yeah, it's a movie that probably, so I was like, we were talking earlier about the the conflict between Reynolds and Costner making this. And this is another thing where they're both very open about how they had different opinions on what the film should be. And apparently, Reynolds was very much of the mindset that this movie should just be all action. Like, he was basically like, this movie can, the concepts of this film can only justify like action, action, action. And Costner is the one who said, like, no, wait, we got to slow things down and have a lot of character stuff. And I mean, I'm going to have to go with Reynolds on this one.
Yeah.
Now, that's weird because I know, like, the Reynolds cut is, like, way longer, and I'm guessing probably even more boring. That's just my assumption. But I think, like, this, like, a 90-minute version of this or an hour and 40-minute version of this that's just, like, action scene after action scene would be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Or if you're going to do the character stuff, then it just needs to be better. I think you might be right. I haven't even really considered it, but maybe it is just a byproduct of Costner being miserable making this. They said like he was very upset after the near-death experience he had. Maybe like kind of never came back from that. He's also going through a divorce. He's not getting along with the director. You're right that just all plays on screen. He brings no humor and levity to this. And this is the point where I should come in and say we've been talking a lot of shit about Kevin Costner. Let me clarify here. I actually really like Kevin Costner.
Same.
A lot. He's a screen presence I really enjoy. And I've actually, for a long time, I was bummed that his career kind of went away. And I was very happy when he started to come back. And I like seeing him pop up now in kind of like cool little like character actor roles. But man, and I love him as Robin Hood. Inconsistent accent aside, I really like, I love the Untouchables. Bull Durham and Field of Dreams, both great. But yeah, he's just a wet blanket in this. Pun intended. Pun intended. Woo.
There it is. He's just miserable.
Yeah.
He's miserable on screen, and it seeps into his performance. I really don't think that he's quite acting in this movie, if that makes any sense.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts on kind of your whole feelings? Oh, actually, no. I do want to talk about like the end. Okay,
so, do you want to talk about Jack Black at all?
I read about that. I didn't watch the scene though.
Maybe you didn't watch the scene. It's in the movie.
No. It's not. I thought it was a deleted scene. Is it not?
No, he's in the movie. That's the thing. Is like this is why people are always there's an ongoing thing where people are shocked to find out that Jack Black is in Waterworld because like all the other smokers, he's covered in dirt and he has like 2 lines, but he's the pilot of the plane that attacks them and that ends up getting like hooked to the trimaran.
Oh, that was him? I didn't even notice that because you're right. He has his goggles on and everything.
So very early Jack Black appearance. So for you Jack Black completists, no matter what we say, you have to watch Waterworld.
Yeah, you have to go through. You have to actually do the extended cut.
Or your Michael Jeter completists, who plays Old Gregor in this. And
yes. I do like Michael Jeter. I like when he shows up.
I do like Michael Jeter too. I was going to say, like, unfortunately, he's only in the very beginning and then at the very end. But he's just one of those actors who. He just makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
Like when he's on screen, you're just like, oh, this guy just like there's something about him,
it's his voice, his look, his presence. He was a good one he was one of those really good character actors. When he popped up, I was always happy to see. Jurassic Park 3 when he pops up. We actually are. By the way, we're Jurassic Park 3 defenders.
Oh yeah,
that's another conversation. But we really like Michael Jeter anytime he shows up. So that was fun. Even in this like weirdly, totally out of purpose, completely plot-driven Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, very. There's a lot of I'm glad you mentioned how much of a Deus Ex Machina is. A lot of stuff in this movie is like very coincidence and convenience based, which I know happens in movies, but it's kind of out of control in this one.
One of the biggest ones was they're hungry. Okay. They need food. Yeah. Okay. So I'm watching this movie and my main 3 protagonists are very hungry and they're starving, and then the mariner's like, I got an idea. So he hooks himself up to his little sailboat. He jumps in the back, and the music is fucking like, pounding. Like the theme's going, and we're rocking, we're rolling. Like something's going on. We're like, what is he doing? Is he like shifting the ship? Is he like making it go faster? What is he doing? And then bam, the biggest fucking CGI sea monster weird thing pops up and eats him, and he kills the sea monster, and then that's how they got their food. It's never talked about again. We never discussed what the fuck that was. I jumped out of my seat being like, what the fuck is going on? Not only is Costner or the Mariner a mutated whatever the fuck that we're not talking about, but all of a sudden now we have sea monsters. Like, I didn't think that was part of what was going on here. I thought just the polar ice caps had melted, but apparently now we have sea monsters.
Well, by the way, though, and not that I'm trying to add $100 million more to the budget, but if that had been like a really cool long sequence where he fights a giant sea monster,
Fuck yeah.
might have been, especially coming at that point in the movie, probably would have been a saving grace.
Absolutely.
Fortunately, it's just nothing. But
yeah, and it's completely shocking. It was really like I had no idea what was going on, but I just wanted to touch on that. I completely forgot about that.
I'm glad you mentioned a couple things that remind me of before we wrap up. There's some things I'd be remiss if I didn't hit on. So first of all, I wanted to talk about the map. We got to get back to that. But you also mentioned the music. Not a good score.
No.
I read about how. So I'm sure you read this too about how Mark Isham did an initial score that was rejected by Kevin Costner because he thought it sounded too ethnic and weird.
And it was never recorded either. He never even recorded
it was just he did like temps of it. That makes me think that score is probably pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like I bet it sounded really weird and like bizarre and probably what this movie like probably would have added something to the movie. Because then James Newton Howard comes in and gives what I would affectionately call generic hero theme number 3 as the main theme to this. That is like embarrassingly trite.
Bland?
Like God, every time it comes on, because they play it a lot during like heroic moments, and it's so silly. Like it's just like it's too like it sounds like the hero music that plays in like bad comedies or something.
Totally.
I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it ruins a lot of scenes in this. So the score was really a bummer on this one.
Yes, it definitely needed something weird or just better. I mean,
and like more and like recognizable theme. Like it has a recognizable theme, but like the Deacon doesn't have a theme. You know, like I wish like the Smokers had like a cool weird theme that played.
Yeah, like there's no real motifs other than the Mariner's theme.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about this map.
Okay.
So the conceit of this film, the MacGuffin of this film, is that Enola has a tattoo on her back that is a map to Dryland. So Dryland is the mythic, you know, people are like, oh no, Dryland doesn't exist. So this is Waterworld. Everything's covered in water. People don't even remember that, because there's a whole sequence in this film where he takes Helen underwater to show her like cities. Like we're so far in the future, people don't even remember that what Earth used to be. And so the mystery is, and like I said, it's not much of a mystery, but what is this map? How'd she get it? Whatever. The map, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. The map is literally a circle with like an island on the top of it.
Yeah.
What? Like, so you're telling, like, we know people understand directions in this because they often say like go north, or you know the guy tells them the atoll is like, you know, about 6 miles south of here or whatever. Why do they need this little girl? You look at that map once and you go, oh, I guess I just keep going north.
Yep.
And then it's the North Pole. I suppose that's what it is. Really, that's all the map tells people. And then there's this whole thing where everyone's like looking at it and be like, "Do you know what it means? Can you translate it?" I don't know. And like they have to find somebody that can actually read it. They're like looking at it, and like there's that scene where the smoker is looking at it and be like, "This would make more sense if we could stretch it out, like cut it off her back and flatten it." I'm like, "What are you talking about? All it is it's a circle with an island on it." Yeah. It's like it's ridiculous. I can't believe like no more thought was put into it being some kind of weird code on her back or something. It's literally just like I there's some, you know, like there's some Asian like language on it too, but I don't think anyone ever reads that. It's just more like they're going off of like the visual of it. It was so weird.
It made the dagger MacGuffin in Rise of Skywalker seem brilliant.
Yeah, well, I don't know, let's not go that far, but
okay. I just wanted to shit on Rise of Skywalker again. The circle with a point on it was pretty silly, and especially how they figure it out, Trev, is really a work of genius. It's just look at it upside down, and then go there, and guess what they do? They go there.
Yeah. Yep.
And they find presumably, what is it, Mount Everest? Like I'm assuming, right? It's got to be something like that, right?
Yeah, I'm not exactly. Yeah, who knows? But I mean, ultimately, like the question is, like, it doesn't even take them. It doesn't seem. And I guess it's kind of slow. It takes them a while to get there. They're in a blimp now. We should say at the end of the film, they're in a blimp.
Right.
This is another moment I like. I like the reveal of Dryland as Kevin Costner waking up and there being a seagull on the blimp.
Yes, that was great.
All these people have never seen birds. I thought that was kind of cool.
That was sweet.
But it's not like this thing is like there's no like protective barrier around it or anything. It just seems strange that in Waterworld, where people literally do nothing all day but sail around, that this has not been found by many people.
Yeah. And Waterworld's been around for presumably hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah. Why is this such a secret?
It just doesn't come together.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't come together. The reveal is sort of cool, but then when you really take an extra 10 seconds to think about it, it is just pretty fucking stupid.
So like the last thing I wanted to say on this, because you asked,
Sure.
The thing we're always trying to hit on when we talk about this, the film here in the middle of the podcast is like what went wrong. And obviously neither of us thought this film was that good. And obviously that plays a big part into it. I just don't think the movie was good enough to really catch on in a bigger way.
Yeah.
But I will say, and we mentioned this earlier, it is kind of strange. Not strange, I don't know. It tells you how different of a time it was in 95 compared to now. That this movie had a target on its back when it came out, just because of that stuff about the budget and all the behind the scenes stuff. In a way that was kind of strange to me, because especially the budget thing, again, just a few years later after this, we saw the same thing happen with Titanic, right? Now, the fact that Titanic blew up and was a huge box office and critical hit kind of made people stop ever like being this vindictive about movies with high budgets. And nowadays we just like accept, what you're telling me, this new movie coming out doesn't have a $400 million budget. It must not be very good,
Yeah.
But it's funny to think back that in 1995, everyone was just ready to shit on this movie right when it came out because it had such a high budget. Like that was the thing. Everyone was just like, oh my God, I can't believe anybody made a movie for that much money. And it was just this movie came out with so much bad buzz already there. That's all the talk was for this film. I feel like everyone went and saw it in that first weekend or two. It was like a novelty of being like, well, we got to see how much of a mess this is.
Totally.
Because of all the talk. And that doesn't happen as much anymore. So we get little snippets of it, like obviously things like Solo and things like that come out with or like Justice League. There's some like awareness of how things kind of got messed up behind the scenes. But good Lord, like this film, that's all anyone talked about, and it really sunk the film, again, before it even came out. I think that ultimately that's what ultimately killed this movie.
I mean, people weren't really missing much either, so.
No, and that's the thing. It's like if it had been awesome, it could have overcome all that. So I guess it's a 1-2 punch, right?
Well, yeah, like give me that big sea monster scene and make it like this fucking sweet 15-minute battle or something.
Yeah, give me a likable hero.
Yeah, or just give me more. Yeah, give me a reason to give a shit.
And by likable hero, we don't mean that he needs to crack jokes all the time or anything. Because like you said,
Yeah.
like Max Rockatansky is like the prototype here.
Yeah.
You get an actor, you get a Mel Gibson or a Tom Hardy, someone who oozes charisma, which Costner often does.
Yeah.
But not here.
No.
But you just have them commit to it, and they don't have to crack jokes, but just like there has to be something like a wild look in their eyes or something. That's what you get from Max, right? There's just like, you want to watch him because he seems this feral beast on screen, and you're waiting for like some bit of humanity to creep into him. But here, he's just like this like grumpy slug the whole film.
And that's the thing is he's grumpy, but his performance just isn't well put together like a Max. Like exactly how Max is going to react in those movies, and like you get it when you watch The Mariner. He's trying different things, but it doesn't come together. It just doesn't come together at all. And I wouldn't even say it's a shame. There's a couple movies that, I've said maybe it's a shame that it didn't work. This one was like, I don't think I'll ever watch Waterworld again. I have no reason to watch it. I don't implore people to watch it. Implore, is that the right word? I'm saying the right thing, right? I can't recommend it. I think it's fine for the like maybe YouTube the sweet action scene, and for 15 minutes throw that on your TV, and that's pretty sweet. Just to revel in the old school practical effects that we rarely, if ever, will get again. That's the good shit. But other than that, you can skip it. You can read about it. You can listen to it this podcast. But other than that,
honestly, this is definitely a film where all the behind the scenes stuff is way more interesting than the movie itself.
Absolutely,
it's a fascinating film to read about, but not a fascinating film to watch.
No.
Oh, and I was also really worried. This is totally off. I'm sorry, but this is totally off the cuff. No. But I was really worried watching this movie for Kevin Costner and Gene Triplehorn's toes the entire movie. You're thinking about all these injuries that happened. So you said Kevin Costner almost got lost at sea. Gene Triplehorn and the little girl. I keep calling her the little girl. Tina Majorino. Oh, wow. They both almost drowned. I believe it's Kevin Costner's stunt double that had like a near fatal like embolism in his brain from like getting the bends coming up from a dive. But all I kept thinking about is Kevin Costner's ship, which actually is kind of cool, the design of it.
Oh, yeah.
The sides of it are like a stretched out net that you run on. And they're barefoot running across the thing all the time. And I was just thinking, man, You're running across a net on your bare feet. How are there, like, I'm surprised nobody like got a toe ripped off.
And they don't seem like they're like, you know,
he's got web toes though, so I guess that's the thing.
But it's not like they filmed it kind of like The Hobbit, you know, like they're all seemingly wearing like foot shoes.
Mm-hmm.
It does look like they're running around and putting their legs and feet in danger the entire movie. There's some really cool rope action too. Like he swings around that. Okay, I'll give Kevin Costner a little bit of credit right now. His performance is terrible, but boy is he giving it his all when it comes to the physicality. Yeah. He's really putting in fucking work. That's him doing a lot of those stunts. Like you can see it. He's kind of pitch perfect on the way he's sailing this boat. You can tell he's experienced. You can tell it's his. He sells that really, really well. And the stunts in it are pretty awesome. And he does a good job. Everything other than that, though, he's atrocious.
And you know what his reward for that was? Is that when this, and this is something you probably read about too, and I remember this, is that when this film was coming out, all anyone talked about with him when this was coming out was like, wow, it looks like he's losing his hair. Like,
oh my
there's
God,
like so much talk about his hair in this movie, and it's like, yeah, sure, it's true. Like, especially, look, if someone, your hair, like, I can speak to this. When your hair is thinning and then you take a shower or you get your hair wet, it looks much more like it's not there.
Yep.
And so that's just the thing. But it's so funny that became like a high talking point for this film, to where there was even rumors that they were CGIing more hair onto him, which he had to deny. Who gives a shit?
And once again, so much stuff plaguing the actual critical reception of the film itself. It was CGI hair. It was injuries. It was an overblown budget. It was...
the gills on his neck look like vaginas.
Oh my, yeah. Also, that's one thing too. The design, the gills behind his ears are really stupid. That makes no sense. Just put it on his chest. Do what they're doing in The Boys. If you're watching The Boys right now on Amazon, there's a character called the Deep, and he's basically Aquaman, but he's got actual gills, you know, where gills would probably be on a human being, but these ones are weird behind his ears. It's really,
or like
really
put him on his neck and make them more pronounced so that he really feels like more alien, because he pretty much just passes as human throughout, you know, and every time you look at him in this. So,
and again, it sounds like we're getting a little nitpicky now, and I even think I am. Well, too,
here's the thing: the reason we're getting nitpicky is because we're trying to think of things to talk about with a film that actually doesn't offer you a lot.
So should we jump into what could have been?
Yeah, please, because I mean, I have nothing more to say. It's not good. It's I like I said, I wish it was. I wish I enjoyed it, but nah.
No, it sucks. So yeah, what could have been? You had mentioned it earlier in the episode about that there's some theme park attractions all over our world about Waterworld, and they're actually still going on today, despite, I mean, not now because of COVID, but in general, they're still playing today, and a lot of rumors were, especially because the budget and how they never made any money on this movie, that it feels like they just kind of had to keep it going, you know, to make something from the name. But yeah, like if this thing popped off, I think... What's the storyline? You just rewatched... I have actually seen the live attraction in person as a kid, and I remember, honestly, it was pretty fucking sweet.
It's pretty funny. I would recommend people go watch it on YouTube, because like I said, your chances of seeing it in person, you know, in a post-COVID world probably aren't great at the moment. Yeah. But these stunt spectaculars are always pretty funny to me, because, you know, it's like they're kind of you realize it's these these stunt actors who do this 7 times a day. Some of them clearly think it's, you can kind of tell the ones who are maybe new to the show and the ones who have been doing it for like 2 years and are just like, well, whatever, man. Like they're not like their line delivery is kind of weak, but they have to like project it to the audience. I don't know. There's just something really funny about it. But the storyline goes back to the atoll, and it's Helen comes back to the atoll to tell everyone there about dryland. And she's like, we found dryland. We should all come with me. She's like, we got to go though, because like there's probably smokers that are interested too, and they might have been following me. And then they go like, smoker, like right after she says that, someone's on watch is like, smokers are coming, and the smokers attack. Now here's where I think it gets funny, because they obviously put some work into thinking like, well, so this is obviously a direct sequel to the movie, right? So she shows up alone, and she's like talking about how she's like, I don't know where the mariner went, you know, he's not with me anymore, but I came from dryland, I'm going to take you all back. So like, okay, some thought has been put in, like what's the next logical step? But then when the smokers show up, the deacon comes with them. He's the main bad guy, and you go like, wait. I'm pretty sure I just watched him blow up at the end of the movie. So that's odd. Like, why couldn't they just make a new bad guy? You know, it's not like I really like Dennis Hopper in this movie, but we're not talking about Darth Vader here. The Deacon does not become an iconic character that you need to have in your stunt spectacular. Also in the version I watched, when the Deacon shows up, So there's a brief joke in the movie about, he says something about his short game. So you realize he plays golf on the Exxon Valdez, which kind of, I guess makes sense, right? They're like golf clubs would be left on the ship and everything, and they're just kind of working off the stuff left behind by the old people. But in the version I watched of the Stunt Spectacular, he gets to the atoll, and one of the first things he does when they take it over is he hits a golf ball into the crowd, and then the actor playing the Deacon goes, "Look at me, I'm Tiger Woods." I was like, what? Why do they know about Tiger Woods? The timeline is insane here. I don't understand. But yeah, then obviously the Mariner shows up, and he has to save Helen, and eventually ends up that the entire atoll blows up. Only Helen and the Mariner survive. They sail off, and it's supposed to be a happy ending. And the narrator comes on, as people are leaving, he's like, "And so the Mariner and Helen are okay." And it's just like, Helen just got everyone in this atoll killed by coming back to tell them about dry land. Good going. These people are doing fine. They're just chilling. Yes, they want to know about dry land, but they probably liked being alive more. Whatever. But yeah, it's pretty cool. There is that moment where you probably remember this. Someone said they legit just fly a plane. Yeah, obviously it's not actually flying, but a plane lands into the water. That part's obviously the big highlight of the
it's
show.
Awesome.
A lot of explosions. And the last thing I want to say about the version I watched, it's probably if anyone just goes and looks up Waterworld stunt thing, it's probably the first one you come across too, because it was just it was the first hit. Obviously, a lot of people have recorded this. I watched the first one that came up. They do a little meet your cast thing at the end. Mm-hmm. And the guy who does the Deacon, he's the one who introduces everybody. And it's funny because he legit says, you probably recognize all these people from, and then he starts saying, there's Bob from Transformers. And it's like, no, these are stuntmen. Nobody recognizes these people from anybody. And then the lady playing Helen, who is very attractive, by the way, they're like, and Helen from General Hospital. I was like, wait, what? Is this a legit General Hospital actress that just is now working at the Waterworld Stunt Spectacular? Very weird, but very funny.
So you're saying for the sequel, if this would have caught on, we would have had the General Hospital cinematic universe, Westworld.
Perhaps. Well, no, I'll tell you. I'll give you your moment here in the sun to talk about what you thought sequels could have been. But I have some more information about what a sequel possibly could have been, because also today I managed to read a little bit of Waterworld: Children of Leviathan, which is the comic book sequel. So do you know about this?
Yeah, I do, and that's kind of what I was, because when I was writing things down of what would I want from the sequel, it would be all about his backstory. That was the biggest thread for me was the Mariner's mutation. It was just so dumb because it was dangling there the whole fucking movie, and it's never ever talked about. So I'm like, man, I want him to become new Aquaman. You know what I mean? I want him to go into the depths and find all this. I wanted an Aquaman movie as the sequel. Go underwater and find his people and his tribe and get the origin of whatever that mutation is. And so that was what I wanted from a sequel. If this was to keep going, I wanted almost entirely that. I didn't even really want him to come back to the surface in a weird way. You know what I mean? I wanted to be all underwater. And then I did look up this, and the comic book is basically that. But it kind of hints at his mutation being an engineering thing.
Yeah, so I didn't get a chance to read all of it because it's not. So this is not a comic book. It's even still in print. In fact, It was published by Acclaim Comics, which does not exist anymore. I was like, how am I going to find this? Because I wanted to look at it for this episode. I went on Amazon, and it sells for quite a lot. The Waterworld heads apparently have driven up demand on this. But thankfully, some people have put quite a bit of it online. So if you really want to find it, you're going to be able to find this. So I read some of it, and here's what I'm going to say. Chris, the Waterworld comic book sequel, actually kind of awesome. I was actually it's kind of cool. I was digging it. I do want to read you something kind of funny from the first issue.
Sure.
So you'll notice when you read it that the Mariner does not look like Kevin Costner.
Yes, I read about this as well.
Yes, so Kevin Costner would not give them permission. And here, there's the first issue ends with the artist talking about this. So I'm just going to read you this page because I thought this is kind of funny because it ends on something that we were just talking about. So here's this little story about this. Can you draw Kevin Costner? Jeff Gomez asked me. Of course I could draw Kevin Costner. Broadway comics had just tanked and I was out of a job. I would have drawn anything they wanted me to draw. Bob Dole comics and stories, you name it. Waterworld, I repeated. That's a movie property, right? Does that mean capes or no capes? I like to research my assignments very carefully. Once we had cleared up that important distinction, I did the professional thing. I sat down and learned to draw Kevin Costner. The Kevin Costneriest Kevin Costner you ever saw. No sooner than I turned in my promo art, though, than Gomez informed me of a slight hitch in our plans. Kevin Costner himself declined to give us permission to use his likeness. And who can blame him after the pounding he took on the movie? So I had to redesign the Mariner. I took the opportunity to recast the character as someone who with a little more of a hard edge. Those seashell earrings weren't making it for me. Someone with more internalized rage, someone with more of a look of an outsider, and someone with more hair. I love they threw in that little final pot shot at Costner.
Fucking got him.
Yeah.
That is so funny.
But yeah, so what I read, like I said, I didn't read the whole thing, but yeah, it definitely has more of an Aquaman vibe to it. It's it starts with him kind of fighting this giant we call it a whale fin, and it's like a big sea beast. And then you find out there's still more people. You know, he's still basically doing the same thing he had been doing. He's going down and scavenging and just kind of living his life. And he sees these people on a ship attacked. Oh no, he sees this like submarine come up. And it turns out, and this is probably a pretty natural thing that I'm sure sequels would have gotten to. You find out that there are like underwater research facilities that were around before, the polar ice caps melted, that still have people living in them. And so there's like other societies that live underwater, and they don't think anyone lives above water. They don't think there's anyone on the surface.
Oh, that's cool.
But some of the people like steal like a submarine ship and get away, and they go looking to see if there's anything else up there. And he sees one of these submarines like come up, and in typical Mariner fashion, he sees them get attacked and he just doesn't care because they still play him as like kind of a dick, right?
Right.
But they get attacked by these like bad guys that are like really interesting looking. They're like covered in armor that's like made of like giant like lobster shells and giant crab shells and stuff. So they look like sea beasts even though they're humans. But it turns out they work for this bad guy called Leviathan, who is very much like he's got a real like Baron Harkonnen or oh god, why is the bad guy's name in Fury Road escaping me? Morton Joe. He's got a Morton Joe look to him. Right? He's this big giant fat guy who sits in this giant tank. He's got he actually has barbed wire like running through him, like through all his skin. And their whole thing is they take these like jellyfish and put them into the tank with him, and as the jellyfish sting him, it gives him visions. Mm-hmm. And so he like has these visions where he's telling people like, we're gonna go find these people and take over their underwater city. And it turns out that actually Deacon worked for him. Like all of he's like Leviathan, all his underlings are called deacons, and the deacon in the movie was just one of his deacons. And then there's this whole thing where now also the Mariner's having these visions where he's kind of remembering, suddenly he's having dreams of being in a tank as a young boy and having these humans in like kind of like hazmat suits on the outside looking at him. And you start to realize that, he's not a natural evolution. He was made. Right. Like, he's the byproduct of like an experiment that happened in one of these cities. So I haven't really got to the end of it, but that's all like you said, it's cool backstory. There's like way more adventure already in it. Yeah, totally. And again, I mean, obviously I know it's a comic book, so of course it's going to be, right? But it's it's more cartoony. It's just more, it's interesting because you made the Aquaman comparison. And first of all, I want to point out, you said you wanted an Aquaman movie, but you got an Aquaman movie that was awesome and you didn't like it, so whatever. But this comic book definitely reminded me more of that kind of vibe. So if people like want to find it online, I definitely say looking into it. I don't know that it's worth paying like the ridiculous prices I'm seeing for it, but if you're dead set on finding it because it's out of print, you'll find some people have uploaded it on some sites.
No, that's sweet. That's fun, and it hits you in that B movie vibe, right? And that's
and that's the thing is, and like that's where I think a sequel needed to go, right? Like you said, it needs to expand this mythology, it needs to give you more of this world, and it definitely needs to flesh out the Mariner as a character more and make you. I don't know, if you're not gonna make him more likable, at least make him more interesting. And totally, getting into a whole backstory where he's like an escaped experiment or something. I don't know. At least that's given me something to latch on to.
Yeah. I like that quite a bit. Yeah, the escaped experiment is fun. I might have to go buy that comic book.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I will not. What were the prices? What were the prices you saw? Honestly.
Let me see here. Give me a sec. So, just a quick search. I just looked up Waterworld comic book on Amazon. You can get issue 1 for $24.99 plus $5 shipping. Mm-hmm. Issue number 4, $39.99 plus $5 shipping. Now these are American prices. You're in Canada, so it's probably more like $300.
Yeah, it's closer. That's lowballing, actually.
You need to probably put out another mortgage in your house if you wanted to get the complete run of all 4 issues.
Yeah, no, I'm not buying those.
No.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's Waterworld.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, Kevins, both of you, but you know. They made up. They're doing okay, I guess. But yeah, this is ultimately not one where I don't I don't regret the lack of a Waterworld franchise.
No. This is put it in the if you're keeping score at home, this is one I'm more like, see you later.
Yeah.
But I guess if you liked listening to this and you want to follow us on social, we are everywhere. Our main handle on Twitter is at F2, the number 2, FPod, at F2FPod. We're on Instagram, Facebook.
We're not on TikTok yet, but who knows?
Not on TikTok yet. But we are. Just look at the description in your whatever you're listening to on your podcast player. We've linked everything there, so check us out. Also, I wanted to mention, if you liked us, actually go like us, like the podcast. Rate or review or whatever you want. Please. That would be super cool. If you could just give us a like, that'd be fucking sweet. And like us there, like us everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're still sticking with that, huh?
We're fucking keeping it, man. I don't know. I don't have any final thoughts. You, Trev?
I don't know. Since our last one, rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. I guess.
Yeah. That was sad. Thanks for bringing us to a downer.
I know, but I mean, it's like it feels like worth saying because man, that was horrible, and
that sucked, yep.
we were both fans, and that's a loss that. I don't know. I mean, this is a movie podcast, so we might as well hit on it and
sure,
it's worth. I just think it's worth saying our thoughts are with everybody affected by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
go watch to bring it up. I'll bring it up a little bit. Go watch Universal Soldier because we were both pleasantly surprised by how awesome that movie is.
Right. Yeah, that was great. That was super fun. My first time.
Yeah.
Next week next
episode.
Yeah, next episode. We are looking at Super Mario Brothers. So go watch that.
Staying in the realm of bizarre 90s franchise attempts.
I don't know what I'm going to think about that one. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I don't.
Been a long time. Sorry.
All right. Thanks for listening.